After that 2.4 livestream, I have not been able to look at Cristoforo the same way. This 4-star looking bookworm of the Fraxidus has suddenly become a far more significant figure in the Wuwa story. I know I'm knee deep in speculations again, but some of the stuff they revealed in that 2.4 preview, his existence is now something I cannot ignore. And I should have known, he's a Fraxidus member for a reason, and they're all crazily powerful in some way, shape, or form. So let's take the time to explore what we know of him, what we've seen of him, and what we can allude to based on 2.4. Our first time meeting Cristoforo is literally when we step onto Renascita soil for the first time. Kinda hard to ignore the only dude wearing crimson red in a sea of white and bland color palettes. Sure, he presents himself as a modest playwright visiting Raguna in search of inspiration for his latest work, but off rip, I immediately saw this guy as Fraxidus material, because ain't no way is that color scheme not Fraxidus drip. At this point in time, he's a bit of a mouthpiece for some Renascita lore. As we progress the main story, suddenly he starts appearing out of nowhere. It's as if he's closely monitoring us. Perhaps his appearance on the Renascita shores we arrived on was purposeful. Finally, when he appears with Frolova, that's the nail in the coffin which confirms his allegiance with the Fraxidus. Here, Frolova reveals that Cristoforo already has arrangements in place in Renascita, namely the whole narrative of the rover fighting against the Sentinel and thus revealing its true form. As if all the events that have taken place were part of his plan. Hell, even the events that haven't taken place yet, because as Frolova puts it, to not spoil the next act, she might give Cristoforo's plot a little nudge. But then, Cristoforo ascertains that his crafted plots are simply part of the stage production. What the characters do is on them, which is basically him saying that yeah, he'll light someone's house on fire, but the house owners are free to do as they please. Like, that's still messed up, but at least it's indirectly messed up, you know? Still, his motivations for all this are simple. He gets turned on by the tenacity of the human spirit. And it's only in the most tragic of times where the fervorance of humanity is truly tested. No wonder he's sided with the Fraxidus then. For a group that's literally wanting an apocalypse to come about, this is an absolute goldmine of content for our blondie with green eyes. And now, we move to 2.3 for his next appearance, namely in Jacona's companion quest. Our next meeting with Cristoforo is once again when we're with Carlotta and dude's just spying on us from the outskirts. Maybe our guy's into voyeurism, I don't know. And without even a word from his mouth, suddenly we get a glimpse into what could be his resident's ability. Some kind of possession magic, which led to the Cuddle Wuddles not being so cuddly anymore. Later, we learned that the plushies were actually possessed by the fear of the Ragunesi, which create these daemons that can possess. And with how nefarious that sounds, yes, that's a very fitting ability for a Fraxidus member. Finally, we learn that Frederico has indeed been working with the Fraxidus, namely with Cristoforo, and yet Cristoforo appears to be working both for and against the Order's interests. But once again, this is all probably just Cristoforo going at it with prepping his stage play. And finally, we come to my revelations in 2.4. From the preview trailer, there was a lot happening here. First off, we see Cristoforo with his back literally turned to Fleur-de-Lis as she has a freaking god sword fully powered. The former Thronodian Sentinel Resonator sees this art student as being that much of a threat. And what's funny is that her threats ain't nothing to him apparently, because her attention deserves less than his literature. It's not only the disrespect Cristoforo is showing Fleur-de-Lis, but it's also him farming so much aura, and there is not a single ounce of tension in him. He's loving it. Probably because, as Fleur-de-Lis puts it, he plotted this tragedy, which tells me that in 2.4, we're going to see one of the fatal fruitions of Cristoforo's story. And the reason he's so happy is because he finally gets to witness the fruits of his labor, the fervor of humanity. Next, Frolova mentions how the rover and the Blessed Maiden are deeply interwoven in the fate he has spun, which begs the question, just how much of everything is because of Cristoforo? Because to me, that sounds like we've been knee-deep in his machinations since we set foot in Renascita. So rather than Frolova being the main threat, it could be that Cristoforo is actually the big baddie in this story. And as he continues to recite the many binaries which run our world and make up our personalities, we see him with his book as one of the pages seems to be burning away. What that implies, what it even is, I don't know. Maybe he has some kind of ability to make whatever he writes in that book into reality, and it burns the page once it's been manifested, although that would be wildly OP. Scar jump scare. And what I'm about to say next might trigger some people, but it's possible the Scar we're seeing here might not actually be him. This could be a sequence where Cristoforo is just relaying how much of Rover's history he knows, and thus we see Scar in the flashback. Or maybe the Fraxidus really did give him his get out of jail card. Guess we'll have to wait and see. But it's also in the scene where he reiterates just how deep in his schemes we are, boasting that the rover alone, or I think it's the rover, cannot undo his story. Which to me sounds like this is where the power of friendship will overcome Cristoforo's plot. But honestly, maybe that's what he was waiting for, because after all, the power of friendship is also an expression of humanity's spirit. Now let's go to the final piece of this analysis, the story trailer. I think just the very notion of him previewing the future events of Septimon is already a big tell in terms of how significant his role will be. But admittedly, it was actually the reveal of his 2D design which gave me more revelations, because it's here where Frax's designs, namely its motive, become very eye-opening. A pun I'll mention later. First off, dude literally looks like a crow. From the beaked mask, to the talons on his hat, to the feathers on the back, his design here screams avian. And then at this angle, we see even more feathers, but aligned on his cape. Remember when I mentioned the eye-opening pun? Well, look at the feathers here. Open eyes. Gosh, I'm so funny. But I think the biggest significance of all of this, look at the birds that fly around him. The infamous red-eyed black birds. Infamous because these birds we've seen throughout all of Wuthering Waves' story, but there's been nothing in terms of what they're doing or why they're even there. Now, with Cristoforo's whole design motif being about eye-opening black birds, I think it's safe to say that Cristoforo is the guy controlling these birds. Because think about it, these birds have been appearing throughout our time in Wuthering Waves, and all they've been doing is just watching us. And when we were in Rena Sita, we often found Cristoforo doing the same thing. And in order to even hatch such complex plot lines, it's vital you have as much information on the world as you can. And so far, it seems Cristoforo has been quite successful in this, likely because he's been getting all the information he needs from those black birds. Thus, I think we not only have an answer to the origin and purpose of these black birds, but we also have an answer as to why Cristoforo is now a very major player in the Raguna story. Honestly, Cristoforo might just be the Fraxidus' eyes. Literally, all the information they get could be from him. But additionally, as the eyes, he does not directly interfere in the matters of humanity, just simply takes pleasure in watching them dance in his stories. And there ends my revelations of Cristoforo. The whimsical playwright who was suspiciously in an iconic red could actually be a highly dangerous member of the Fraxidus who centrally drove every single major event that has been taking place in Raguna. But ultimately, this could all be Codswallop, so just take all this with some healthy food for thought. Anyhow, would love to hear your thoughts on Cristoforo in the comments, like and subscribe for more woo-wah stuff, and yeah! I think next up I'll analyze the upcoming Septimon resonators, because it's another bomb of information from the 2.4 livestream that I simply cannot ignore. Fingers crossed Cristoforo becomes playable, by the way. Anyhow, much love y'all, and peace.